During the incident, the assault, the attack on the school, the students rendered first aid as if they were in combat.
Heroes.
But let's talk about that mindset, the changing of the mindset. That is not normal behavior for kids to react that way. And yet these children,
yes.
Yeah, these children reacted as if they had been in combat. Is that the new norm? School shootings. We have seen more of them on the news recently. We had the school shooter in Apalachee High School, Barrow, Georgia, Wyndham, Georgia, freshman. Entered the school, 14 years old, was in the school, and he shot and killed two of his classmates, 14-year-olds, also shot and killed two teachers, a male and a female. Today, on Bets and Badges, we wanted to do a recap from a law enforcement perspective on what we know and what we can share with you based on our experience. I am Robert Asencio, and beside me I have my co-host, retired police chief David Magnusson, military historian. How are you, David?
I'm doing good.
Let's recap what we know. So far we know that in addition to the 4 people who were shot and killed, there were 9 others that were hospitalized due to injuries, and there were approximately 30 other individuals who were hurt. We do know that the shooter, 14-year-old, was stopped by the school resource officer, and at the time of the incident, there were an additional 2 resource officers. We do know that the school had prepared with an alarm system that would notify the sheriff's office and the school administration in case, God forbid, they had a shooting, an active shooter. Well, they did. So the school staff were prepared. They had this ID system that they activated. We also know that during the incident, the assault, the attack on the school, students at the school came to the aid of the fallen teachers, at least one of the fallen teachers. And some of the interviews that we've seen on national news were very gripping in that the students who were attending and decided to render first aid heroically actually performed acts that are not normal to students. They're consistent with battle-hardened events. Did you see any of that where the students immediately saw that it was a chest wound? One of the students said he thought it was a sucking chest wound, which is a term. Those of you that have been in the military know about sucking chest wounds. Apply pressure immediately to stop the bleeding, then also helped pull the teacher into safety, into the classroom, away from the gunfire, and then fellow students lifted up the shirt to assess if there was an exit wound. There was more injuries to the teacher, but they rendered first aid, and I gotta say again, as if they were in combat.
Heroes.
But let's talk about that mindset, the changing of the mindset. That is not normal behavior for kids to react that way. And yet these children,
yes.
Yeah, these children reacted as if they had been in combat. Is that the new norm?
I mean, we sadly have gone from, fight, hide, run. We've gone to that from reading, writing, and arithmetic. And how sad is that? But that's the reality. These children, and let's not lose sight, they're heroes. They're children. They've risen to the occasion. They had the wherewithal to do it. And as we said in law enforcement, your head, and in the military, heads on a swivel. Well, fortunately for them, but sadly at the same time, these kids, these children have to have heads on a swivel. They have to be in that elevated code, like Colonel Grossman used to talk about, where ultimately it's
Lieutenant Colonel or Colonel Lou Grossman, right?
Lou Grossman, yeah. And code red is you can't maintain that. There's a time and place for it. That's nothing you can maintain. Yet these children are no longer able to function, sadly, in schools in code yellow. It has to be elevated. And that's going to take its toll too, ultimately, when you're thinking about it. But they had the wherewithal. They had the courage and bravery, and they are to be saluted. The SROs are to be saluted. But I want to bring a point out here. We always talk about the quick reaction of law enforcement. Okay. With that, though, comes the reality that that offender is going to get off some shots first and take out some people before the police, by and large, can respond and neutralize or get the person in custody. So think about that for a moment. And that's what happened. There was a very quick response by the SROs as a reaction to something violent that took place. That in of itself is scary.
Yeah, so that training, right? So the new norm, right? So for the viewer's perspective who don't know us well, David has over 35 years of law enforcement. He worked at the city of Miami in command staff level, ran units, worked robbery, rose from the streets all the way up to command level. Then he left police work in Miami-Dade and went on to Half-Lac, North Carolina, where he became police chief, and then came back down to South Florida, became chief of El Portal. Me, I spent 26 years in law enforcement at the Miami-Dade Schools Police Department, where we prepared to protect those kids and the faculty and the community, as well as working with the local community outside the school district. I served in military and special operations, so we wanted to bring our experience to this conversation. So we know, let's back up a little bit. We know Colobine, right? Colobine was a marking point, a transitioning point for law enforcement in how they responded to these type of school incident or large gathering, public gathering shootings.
It changed the
Let's talk about the police tactics, how that changed.
It changed the paradigm. At Columbine and prior, in a situation with a shooting, you get the experts in the field, the ones best trained. That's SRT, SWAT, to respond. And that's what happened in Columbine, you know, in a nutshell. But while they were mounting up and getting there, the killings were continuing. It became obvious that you can't wait anymore. Yeah. You have to go in, and in most cases, that's what happens. There's been a few. We can think of Uvalde where it didn't happen that way.
But hold on a second, because if you don't mind, you know, for the viewer's perspective, I'm a visual person. So what I'm thinking of is video footage. I remember Columbine, going back to Columbine. I remember, you know, helicopters hovering or videos over the school while the police were perimeterizing the school, setting up a perimeter around the school and waiting for SWAT to come out, right? Tactical units to come out. We did see glass breaking and children jumping out of classrooms, right? Out of windows.
Yeah.
And police receiving them. But at the same time, there was shooting inside the schools and there was chaos going on inside the schools. And that's why this paradigm shifted. And when we're talking about, you know, where officers get on the scene, the first couple of officers assess, but we're now trained to go in after the threat. You want to talk a little bit about that, give the viewers a little perspective of what law enforcement's trained and how they're trained to respond to these things now post-Columbine?
Well, as soon as you get on scene, the idea is to neutralize the threat immediately. As you just alluded to, you can't wait anymore. Okay, and again, we've seen instances where there was waiting, and it's never a positive outcome.
Like you said, of Uvalde.
Uvalde. Now take a look at what happened in Nashville. How a couple of officers never worked together from different squads, yet somebody took lead. They went in and neutralized the person in the library that was shooting up the school. Okay, that's how it's done right. Now you train for it. I can tell you in Havelock, a small geographical area, military town. You had 9 schools because it's military, right? High school, 2 junior highs, and the rest elementary. So we went to all the schools and did this sort of practice where we responded and where they went in, and you had to go in, and we had the sheriff's office as well to assist with SRT, everybody. But it was everybody went in, you knew what your role was, and at the end of the day, the role is pretty similar across the nation. Find a threat, neutralize the threat.
Take him out, kill him.
Take him out, take him or her out, and make it stop. Make it stop. You can't do that from outside. You have to get in there and you have to engage. If you have a lot of officers, you can engage from different areas, you know, and draw confusion to the shooter. But you can't wait because for each moment you're waiting, more kids are being killed.
Absolutely. And that's what happened again in Uvalde, where while they were sitting waiting for either keys or the SRT team to tactical units to respond, children were dying and staff members. So let's go back, because for anybody that's been inside a school, there's a huge echo, right? Yep. You have a lot of ambient light, close quarters, a lot of people. Can you imagine during this incident, you have shots ringing out inside the school, you have people yelling, running through the school, so you have a lot of echoing. You have the lights.
Alarm going off.
Alarm going off, because I'm sure it triggered off alarms, fire alarms, whatever alarm system they have, audible. You have all that going on, the hollering, the screaming, right? The pain, the uncertainty, people trying to get into classrooms because then they go into lockdown, right? And the lockdown theory is that something happens inside the school, you bring the students into the classroom, to safe spaces, and you close the doors, right? Going back to those kids, the fact that they had the wherewithal to render first aid immediately, assess the damage, the injury, the level of injury, pull the teacher to safety inside the classroom, away from the shooting, and then continue to assess and carry on to give the teacher first aid, while all kinds of hell's breaking loose, is beyond normality. And that's why I ask about the shifting of the times, because kids go to school. We send our children to school for the purpose of learning. We send our kids to the theater, if you will, to the mall, large gathering places, for a purpose. We don't send them to be in harm's way. Yet now, that's a reality of life.
I've said often in previous episodes and discussions with my history background, it'll always be the December 6th, the September 10th, the November 21st that keep us up at night. We don't know what the next day brings. Parents sends their child to school. They don't even think, maybe now, and I'm sure they do, but could it happen? Yes. The answer is yes. Could it happen? Yes. You pray it doesn't. Going to the mall, going to the theater. Look what happened in Aurora, Colorado.
Supermarket, Buffalo.
The supermarket in Buffalo, right? Forget the motivations of behaviors. It does that, that's fine at the end for trial purposes or what have you. But the end is still the end. Innocent people getting slaughtered. When they went out and started their day, innocent children getting slaughtered. When they started their day, just happy-go-lucky, doing what they got to do. And that happens.
Yeah. 2 years ago, ABC, I came across this last night, right? ABC News, the national network, they were speaking about school shooters, the profile of individuals that are mass casualty type shooters that extend beyond the school. They looked at their profiles, and per the Department of Health, per bunch of services like the Secret Service, the National Threat Center, the FBI, the Secret Service profile of active shooters, there are a couple commonalities that they saw. That roughly 100% of the individuals that committed the school-age individuals that committed shootings, mass casualty shootings, 100% of them had some mental disorder, right? Some signs of mental disorder. High percentage, roughly 80% of them, when they committed the act of shooting, had exhibited signs previously, had made notion or made it public that they were intending to do harm, right? And a high percentage of them, like 70 some odd percent, a little bit less than 70 some odd percent of the individuals, school-age shooters, were in crisis at the time that they actually committed the offense of shooting.
Look at this case. I mean, a year before they knew something.
Well, his name came up. He had made some threats gaming, as you pointed out, right? And the National Threat Center picked up on it, notified the locals, and I believe they went and spoke with the child, killer, in this case now, and they spoke with his parents. But yet, there was not enough evidence, or there was not enough probable cause, or, that to arrest him. So that's an example of what happened. The question of what could have been done to prevent.
That was a ticking time bomb that the bomb squad couldn't disconnect, and it blew up. a lot of times police, law enforcement, to your question, it's reactive for a variety of reasons, but it's reactive. We will investigate information that comes to us, and you say, well, how about a proactive investigation? But what usually starts a proactive investigation? Something that we're told to keep an eye out. Yeah, right. So, you're. It's like the defensive player in football on an icy field. The offense has the advantage. You don't know which way this person's going to go, and police don't either. I mean, they may have an idea, but it's always based on good intelligence, which again, see something, say something, they can act upon it and watch it. Yeah. But you couldn't have got any better than what just happened.
Well, let's go to the training, right? The law enforcement training, right? So nowadays, the officers, they get their regular police training, and then every 4 years, they get a mandatory retraining. It's a host of different type of blocks to continue their recertification, right? But when it comes to, going after shooters, we do the active shooter training, right? When you're going through these active duty shooter trainings, you go into these close quarter confined areas like schools, buildings, warehouses, where there would be a lot of people. And I got to tell you, it's pretty impressive because, again, going back to the sounds, the odor, the sight, the smell, the feeling, you throw in people screaming. Our officers have to be that much more aware of situational awareness. They also have to be that much more with it, if you will, prepared to identify a threat, distinguish between a threat, a friendly, and a foe. Yeah. And that is how we're training our officers now. And sadly, it looks like the kids are also being trained to do something that one would never think they would ever respond to in a school.
A couple of years ago, there was always the thing that police, law enforcement were the watchdog. Then there was a shift to somewhere a little, I would not say offensive, but a little softer. And I would argue with you as a retired law enforcement professional. No, law enforcement is the watchdog. Law enforcement and the mindset of the law enforcement officers has to be that, with the situational awareness, with the proactive look at going to training, not, I got to go to training no, I want to go to training because this is going to better me in a situation that may very well take place. You can sit at the range all day, and that's good practice, it is, but you're shooting at paper targets, okay? And nobody's firing back, okay? Mm-hmm. It has to be realistic. Well, now with the senses, the overload, that's the word.
Now agencies are going to, yes, you're right, overload. So you want to overload the individual in training so that they react better, right?
Correct.
What is it? Perfect training creates good practice, right? I wouldn't say perfect responses because there's no such thing as a perfect response, but it gets you as professionally prepared as you can. What do we need to look out for? Because let's face it, these incidents are not going to stop.
No.
Okay. In this particular case, as in others that we had recently, the subject committed the killings and the assault, if you will, with an AR style. I think this case, Sheriff Judd Sheriff Smith from Barrow County called it a platform AR-15. But so this one was committed with an AR-15 style rifle. There were a couple others that were committed with that type of an assault type weapon. But reality is, a person can take how many people with a handgun, right? So how do we need to prepare to prevent these? And I know parents play a big role in protecting the public from their kids, right? We could talk a little bit about that, but let's talk about how to prepare and prevent some of these incidents from law enforcement perspective for our viewers.
Let me start with this though. The AR-15, there's a long list. You just take a good look at the last few mass shootings. I'm talking about 9/10. It's AR-15, AR-15, AR-15. There was a study that came out not too long ago that 6 of the 9 most recent mass shootings, the offenders were under 20 years old. I bring that up because from 1947 to 2017, of all the mass shootings, only 2 were under 20 years old. The majority were in mid-20s, 30s, and 40s. What has changed and why? Enabling parents. You go back to the Sandy Hook killer, Adam Lanza. His mother bought him weapons. She knew he had a problem. Who's the first person he killed with the weapon? She was, right? This guy, the other day, knows the problem with his son. He knows the truth, whether he told the law enforcement that came to talk to him or not. He knows the truth, yet he buys the kid an AR-15. To your point with the handgun, you're right. You can go in with a Glock concealed, right? And you can take out a bunch of people. But the wounds, the firepower, the damage done to the organs is far less. This is something more. You can't conceal an AR-15. So here you got these people that are genuinely thinking they're picked on or they're smaller. They want that biggest weapon they can walk around with. And I don't want to hear from this guy. Then the other day, we went hunting with it. Nobody hunts with an AR-15. All right. So, that's hogwash.
Unless you're hunting people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what it's become. Sadly.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You make a sound point. It's always boggled my mind, even for the law-abiding citizens that want to walk around strapped with an AR-15 going to, you've seen the pictures, the Walmart, the 7-Eleven. When you're like in state of Florida, you can carry concealed. Nobody knows you have it. So what's the point of carrying such a large weapon around for protection? Because for safety reasons, as a citizen, you could probably get to a weapon if you're better trained with a handgun than you can with the AR-15. It's a lot of it. It's like a Napoleon complex, and you're putting it into kids' hands that, as you alluded to, have some issues. Now all of a sudden they're equal in stature to the people they feel that they're beneath, and they're going to play God.
So to your point, psychologically, right?
Right.
The shooters who have committed these type of atrocities, who have been analyzed, there's all kinds of research on this. Not research, but data that corresponds to what I'm about to say, which points to, most of them felt like they were being picked on, like you mentioned. They were marginalized. They were not fit in, and they had anger towards the public, the victims, or just anyone out there. In this particular case, we know that Colt Ray's father, right, was arrested and charged. And that is something that I totally agree with. The parent, in this case, if he gave him a gun, gave a child a gun, and the gun goes out and the child goes out and kills with it, then the parent should be held accountable. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that happened in Michigan with Ethan Crumbley.
That is correct.
Mother and father charged. And it's about time. It's about time. I don't know what people are thinking. And you step away from the Second Amendment rights. Most people that take their kids hunting, there's no issue there. That's fine. I think that's America. So be it. They knew differently. You know what? And let the full force of the legal system in this country come down on them, crash down on them as much as their child crashed down on other children that all they did was go to school or go to an assembly or go to a movie theater. But I will say this with great certainty. It'll happen again. And if you look at the averages and you want to compute them, I'm guessing before Christmas you'll have another one.
So far to date, I believe the Department of Justice tally we're well over 400 mass casualty shootings across the country. And we're in September.
I mean, think about that. If it stopped right now, there'd still be more than one a day.
Yeah. So as we're coming down to the last minute, what do you think? Should the parents be charged in this particular case? Should the parents be convicted and held accountable for this atrocity? What do you think? How would you prepare for an active shooter? What do you think of the actions of these children, the victims who rendered aid? What are your thoughts? Share them with us. On that note, we'd like to thank you for being with us on Bets and Badges. You can find us on all podcast platforms under betsandbadges.com or at Bets and Badges. The Millers, Michael Grant Miller, Miami's Community News team, Rachel Brummage, our producer behind the scene. We can't thank you guys enough. And for you, the audience, we look forward to speaking with you